When it comes to money, are you influenced by trying to keep up with the Joneses or peer pressure or images you see on TV or in magazines? Well, those are some of the major influences when it comes to how we feel about money and what we do with our money. Local CPA Phil Umansky is here to talk about how to adjust your attitude and use those influences to your advantage. Hi, Phil.
Good to be here, Cheryl.
Good to see you. That's one of the things that gets a lot of us in trouble is trying to keep up with the Joneses, isn't it?
Absolutely. And then who are the Joneses?
Exactly.
Are they people that we work with or people we live by? But when you think about influences, I sort of think of, as you're growing up, the major influence, of course, is your parents. And so, parents are judged by young people not by what they say, but what they do. So when I was growing up, my mother was very thrifty. She was a single mother. My father passed away when I was about 2 years old. And she really just relied on Social Security to feed and clothe us. So, I did not have an upbringing that was rich. But my mother was always influencing me to go beyond what she grew up with, where she grew up in the Depression. So she said, you got to go to college. I want you to get a degree. I want you to have a good middle or upper middle class income. So that was one of my major influences. And I'm sure everybody in the studio probably has somebody that they were growing up with that either had a positive influence or a negative influence on them in terms of resources and money.
And whether it's positive or negative, we can learn from that, can't we?
We can learn from that, and the most important thing is whether it is a positive influence or whether it's a negative influence. And that's why it's always good to read and look around at other individuals to see maybe what they're doing that's different from what you're doing in your family, particularly if your family has a negative influence on your resources.
Right, you talked about your mother's influence on you, but other family members can also influence how we spend our money. You might have like a favorite aunt or uncle who maybe have a little bit more than you have, or is an extravagant living a life of travel and things like that, and you go, I want to be like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a major influence. Now, guess what's a major influence as well? And that's when you get married. Now, what do you think the two major things are people disagree when they're significant others?
Money.
Money.
And money.
Money and money. The other one actually is time.
Okay.
So there can be a trade-off between time and money. So, a lot of people will say, I don't necessarily want a spouse that makes a lot of money. I would rather have a spouse that maybe makes a little bit less money but has more time with the kids or going to games, soccer games with the kids. But that is one of the significant stressors that couples have. And so one thing I always propose is it's not necessarily that spouses completely be aligned in terms of their ideas, but you got to be sort of aligned in terms of money. Because if you have somebody that's completely different in terms of money style, than somebody else, then it's going to be hard to make that relationship work.
Yeah, everybody has a different upbringing, so trying to align those thought processes sometimes is difficult because one person might feel much more strongly than the other.
Absolutely, and sometimes there has to be compromises. Now, believe it or not, you and Bill and everybody here, I guess they've all left the studio. One of the major influences on purchasing decisions is the media. And when I say the media, I'm talking about television, radio, books that we see, all of those things.
Commercials.
And they're all necessary because they let us know what products and services are out there. But it's also important to say to yourself, do I need this or want it? So you're the final arbiter, final decision making in terms of what media proposes that you buy.
Right, but that's the hardest thing is want versus need.
Yes.
Because we all want.
Absolutely. And I want to give you an interesting story in terms of purchasing decisions.
Okay.
Believe it or not, back in the 70s, basketball players wore their shorts short, very short. Okay, and that was sort of the trend. I mean, in the 70s, I was wearing them too. Then all of a sudden, a cultural icon came along by Michael Jordan. And he decided that he was going to wear his shorts longer, sort of above the knee. And that sparked really a revolution in how people bought things. So sometimes just a cultural icon can come up and say, this is what I'm doing, and people will catch on and do that themselves.
And that's where commercial spokespeople come in, because people are influenced by a celebrity in one way or the other a lot of times, and they're paid very well for that.
And they are paid very well. But there are so many influences on our decisions to buy things. But what's most important is you've got to make the decision yourself whether you need or want the item. And sometimes it's important to turn off all the media images and all the images of other people saying you got to get this or you should have this, and just say to yourself, does it fit within my budget? Is it something that I can afford? Do I need to follow the herd or the crowd for this particular item?
Do you have some basic tips for us as far as following versus being a trendsetter yourself?
Well, I mean, a lot of trendsetters don't try to set out to be a trendsetter. Sometimes they just are there and you see. So the basic tips I say is this: spend within your means, avoid high risk, get rich investments, meet your needs first and then some of your wants. And then in terms of homes and major purchases, don't let somebody influence you. Look around at different alternatives and different products and services, and then you've got to make the final decision whether it's something that you want to purchase.
It actually comes down to what we've talked about before, is really setting a budget. It's setting a budget for the way you think and feel about your money and how you spend your money.
Absolutely. Budget is sort of the major thing that you need. I would put budget as probably one of the bread and butters, like maybe walking or exercise is to staying fit. You got to do it.
Right. If you don't have it, you shouldn't spend it.
Absolutely. And so of all the major influences that we have, the most important influence on your buying and selling decisions is yourself.
All right. We'll have to look at what we see and assess it for ourselves.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Phil. Some great information. We'll post a link to more information on this topic on our website. Just go to WTVR.com/VTM by early this afternoon. You can find out more about this topic or any of our guests on our show today.